Hey everybody, it's Jimmy from the DIY and Digital, and today I'm showing you how I ballast Kato Unitrack. Welcome back everybody. First of all, if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and hit that bell icon so that you don't miss any updates like this video. So today I'm showing you how I ballast and weather Kato Unitrack. I've shown you how I install it, but this is kind of a part 2 to that. So we're going to be looking at what I use for the ballast and all sorts of different things. So let's go ahead and get started. This is the section of track we're going to be working on. As you can see, it's completely unaltered Kato Unitrack. It's already been glued down in place with latex caulk, and I'll show you guys how to do that right up here in the description. It needs a little bit more paint work, but we're going to weather this section and we're going to ballast it. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we're going to be doing is we're actually going to paint the track to begin the weathering process, and I'm actually using some of my dollar store Model Railroad Finds paint right here. It's a simple brown, and then we're going to be adding some airbrush thinner because I am going to be using my airbrush for this. Now you don't have to, you can use spray paint. I've definitely seen that used before. I simply like the way that acrylic works and that it's easy to remove if you mess up. So we're going to go ahead and mix up our airbrush paint mixture. Remember, if you're using an airbrush, you always want to use an airbrush thinner over water. It just seems to work better. I have not had great results with using water to thin. Airbrush thinner is definitely worth the money. And you can see I go for a consistency like milk. I forget where I heard that from, but it's a really good tip for airbrush. You really want to go for that milk consistency. And now we're going to load it into the little hopper for the airbrush, and we're going to take off and begin our painting process. Now it's time to begin painting the track, and what I'm going for is I'm just painting all of the track the exact same color. And what this really does is it just adds that weathered look to it. The brown paint really adds to that rust that you see on real rails, and you're going to end up cleaning it off, but you want to make sure that you get both sides as evenly as possible. You don't want to overdo the paint, but you do want to make sure that it is a nice solid coat. I know some of you that have never seen this before are probably like, whoa, painting the track, doesn't that mess up with the electrical conductivity? Well, if you leave it the way it is, yes, it certainly does, but this is how track is weathered for the most part, and a lot of people do paint their track. It's how you achieve that rusted rail look, and I promise you it works out really well, and this is one of my favorite techniques for weathering railroad tracks. Now it's time to clean off the paint that is on the track on the top of the rails, and I'm using a paper towel wrapped around a camera battery. You want something solid and square so that the paper towel doesn't wipe off any of the paint on the side. So you just hold it taut against that block and wipe it down. And then after a day, we let it dry, and I like to gently go over it with a fine sanding block or sandpaper of some kind just to make sure that everything's off of it. And then you want to go ahead and check your electric conductivity. Go ahead and run a train on it, make sure that everything's good, run it around a lot of times, make sure you don't have any hiccups in the area that you're working on so that you can go ahead and get to the fun part, which is ballasting. So for ballasting, I'm using a similar technique to what I did to weather my design preservation models kits. I'll link that right up here. And what I'm doing is I'm just basically taking a drawing pastel and I'm grinding against, in this case, 100 grit sandpaper, and I'm getting a nice fine black DIY weathering powder. And what I'm going to do is, once I have it all in here and I check and make sure I have a good amount, I'm going to dump it into a little cup, and then we're going to have a nice amount of weathering powder to weather our ballast, because sometimes that just standard gray fine ballast isn't quite good enough. Now in this case, I'm using Scenic Express ballast. You can use whatever your preference is. I just like weathering the ballast a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to dump the weathering powder into the container where I have some of the ballast, and we're just going to stir it just like we're mixing paint. And I like to get it nice and dark, and as you can see, I've got a nice dark color right there, nice and even. And then the next thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be applying some glue to the track, and this is just regular old white glue. You want to make sure that you're getting the sides of the roadbed. You don't want to get any of this on the ties themselves. And if you do, you can just wipe it off really quick. But you want to make sure that you're keeping off the ties because you're going to be doing that a little bit separately later. So we're going to go ahead and put glue all over the track on the roadbed. You want to get both sides evenly. And then you can start putting on your ballast material. And you don't have to be that neat with it at first. We're going to neaten it up afterwards, just as long as you're fairly neat with the way that you apply glue. You want to make sure you get it nice and even. If you need to make more, go ahead and go make more if you need to make a larger batch, but you just want to make sure that you get a nice and even amount all over the areas where you're glued. We're not worried about the top of the track yet. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is we're just bringing a simple paintbrush in, and we are going to be neatening up all the ballast that kind of goes flying everywhere when you dump it out like this. And you just want to get a nice even area. It's not going to be perfect, but you want to get that nice even slope that we all love with ballasting. If you have a little bit of excess in one area and need some in another, just go ahead and sweep it over and just make sure you're getting that nice even slope. So this is how you do the sides of it, and then you'll want to go ahead and start on the top of it. So what I do is I just tap a good amount out of my cup all over the top. You don't have to be too specific with it because you're really going to be using the brush to spread your ballast out like it is. So you just dump it kind of in a general area. You don't want to overdump, and then you'll use your brush to spread it out over the tops. And then one thing, of course, because ballast does tend to go everywhere, you just want to make sure that you still keep every step. You want to keep sweeping and neatening it up because it is going to get, this is one of the messier processes of doing a model railroad, and it does take time and it does take practice, but the more time you take with it, the better it's going to look, and the slower you go also, the better it's going to look. But you just want to make sure that you get everything neat as possible before you start doing the final gluing process. And now it's time to begin the final gluing process, and we're going to start with some 70% isopropyl rubbing alcohol. Now this is put on here specifically to remove surface tension for when we put our 50-50 white glue water DIY scenery cement mixture into it. So if you don't do this, your glue's going to have little bubbles and drops, and it's not going to go in evenly. So what you want to do is you just want to saturate the area with isopropyl rubbing alcohol. Now you'll also notice that I went from the top, doing over the middle, to the very bottom. The reason is sometimes when you do little droplets over the actual area, it can create little splash craters, and the alcohol is going to soak up and it's going to soak down. So if you do it along the top and the bottom, it's going to soak in evenly, and you're going to keep the shape that you worked so hard to create in the previous steps. Now it's time to start applying our 50-50 white glue water mixture, and you'll notice how it spreads out evenly. It doesn't make little droplets or bubbles. That's what you really want, because you want the glue to soak into the cement. You don't want that top layer being the only part that's glued in place. The release of the surface tension really allows the glue to seep into all layers, and it's going to give you a rock hard finish. I mean, the stuff can be really difficult to remove sometimes. So this is going to make everything nice and even, and it's going to make it just absolutely fantastic. And remember, you just want to get as much as possible without overdoing it. Now when you're going along the top, you can just spray it right along the middle right there, And yeah, it's just going to go in and it's going to permeate and it's going to soak nice and evenly across the top. You want to seal on that top as well because you want to make sure that you keep as many particulates out of your locomotives as you can. And then I like to sprinkle a little bit more ballast along the top just to give it a little bit of extra, not a lot, but that's pretty much the entire process right there. So we're gonna go ahead and let it dry, and this is our final result, and we're doing some train testing right here, and as you can see, it runs great, it looks great, it's the exact look I'm going for, and the bottom line is it's kind of difficult to tell that this is Kato Unitrack, which is really what we're going for. I've got the rusted rail look, I've got the good amount of ballast, you can still clearly see the ties, so that's how I ballast Kato Unitrack. I hope you guys enjoyed this. So that's how I ballast and weather Kato Unitrack to make it look a bit more realistic. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I'd love to know how you guys do ballasting and weathering, whether it's Kato Unitrack or regular old track. Go ahead and leave that in the comments below. And if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and hit that bell icon so that you don't miss any updates like this video. Until next time, I'm Jimmy from the DIY and Digital. Happy railroading!